Okay, we're live now.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. It is thankfully Friday, January 26th, and this is the Senate Government Operations Committee. And we are gonna have a committee conversation about S55, the open meeting law, the relook at the open meeting law post-COVID bill. We have our legislative council attorney, we've gone through the bill, we've heard a bunch of testimony. So this is basically just a committee check-in about what are our next steps? What do we want to change? Who do we want to hear from? How are people feeling? This is a must-pass bill, basically, because otherwise we go back to previous law that doesn't account for all the things that happened during COVID. So we really need to pass the bill. We do have time, but we do want to make sure that we're moving forward with it. So, does anybody want to start? I have a lot of notes in the margins of mine, but the sort of general concerns, first of all, is whether or not we want to tackle the whole annual meeting / town meeting stuff in this bill, or if we want to push that off with some kind of report back or a study, or if we want to just leave it out and not mention it at all. So that's one decision point I think we need to make.
Do you want feedback on that? Or are you just
I
identifying?
was trying to identify some things, just to try to frame the conversation a little bit. So that's one thing. I think the other thing is the timeline. Ted Brady brought up some, really relevant points about if we have this effective July 1st, are all the towns going to be able to comply with the hybrid possibility as of July 1st, or do we need to push that a little bit more, stagger it? What do we want to have the Secretary of State's office do in terms of their best practices? How does it get accessed? Who else should be involved? What is the deadline? And how much is the grant that we put in there? So that's another thing that we need to.
Madam Chair, did we get all the feedback we needed
On this bill?
for the numbers?
No, we didn't. So, yeah.
We're still waiting for that.
I can talk to JFO about it, but I just want to hear what the committee wants to do, so I know who to talk to and who to bring in.
I would say my decision point on any of the numbers would be what were the recommendations that we got for the grant program specifically.
Yeah.
What were the recommendations from the Secretary of State's office? I believe was what we were.
Well, I think it might be that VLCT has some information that they were trying to gather for us too. They have some kind of survey out there.
Okay.
But also the Secretary of State and JFO were gonna.
I don't think they've done the survey yet, so I think we'd have to encourage them to do the survey
Yeah.
ASAP.
Okay.
So then the other thing was the local incident situation as
And who
to
calls it?
who called it and can we better define it? And what guardrails can we put in there to prevent it from being overused or used? And then, the records retention issue of how long do we require that people keep the video recordings? And do we require video recordings of all meetings, including in-person meetings that don't have a remote presence? Do we require all the advisory board committees to also do them so that records retention, you're writing this all down, Tom, I can see you, thank you very much.
Too.
And then also better define if subcommittees of non-advisory boards are advisory. So I think that's a decision point, like the subcommittee of the school board that does, the budget committee or the negotiations committee or whatever, are those considered advisory? I have my opinions about that, but that is not well enough defined in the bill. We got a lot of questions about that from people.
Can we also just generally talk about what the definition of it is? Because I don't think I fully understand where we landed on that.
The general definition of advisory board?
Yes.
Cause we need to do further work up.
Okay.
So those, I think based on, they might have to, did you have something else?
We had also discussed it, a potential intent section.
Oh, right, that's right, right. And I think also I got the sense that we might need to better define what a hybrid meeting is.
Yes.
And the intent of a hybrid meeting, because
Yes,
it seems to me that a lot of people are defining it as just, there's a staffer running something in a room where somebody can go if they want to, but nobody else is there and everybody else is remote. And to me, that doesn't really seem like a hybrid meeting. That seems like a remote meeting with somebody in a room running it.
But that's quite honestly what is in law now for what we require, one person in one room.
Right, so that's what I think we need to figure out what we mean by a hybrid meeting, define it, or put intent of, say, it is our intent that this be the thing, or whatever, defer to Tucker on that, but, on how to do that, not to do that. Was there another thing?
Well, that's a lot of things actually.
Yeah.
That's a lot of things, yes, but,
I have at least 8 things here we have to.
okay,
Annual meetings, definitions of advisory and hybrid, money, the VLCT, SOS numbers, local incident, who calls, better defined. Records retention, minutes, how that's tied to when minutes are published and, the official record. Subcommittees, and, the intent section. That's a lot.
yeah, and I think there are also, as Senator Clarkson and I were discussing, there are a couple other bills and other committees that I'm aware of, and there probably are even more that I'm not aware of, that are doing things that are related to the open meeting law for specific types of groups.
Oh,
And
shucks.
so I'm a little concerned about there being carve outs in other places that we're not aware of. I think Senate Economic Development is working on something that might,
Act 250 for district commissions.
district commissions for Act 250. Health and welfare has a bill that has to do with the Green Mountain Care Board. There's the House bill that we're gonna get, about the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And there undoubtedly are others, but we just need to make sure that so if you know of anything else, and I'll ask our attorneys too, but we just wanna make sure that it's not in conflict with what we're trying to do here for all boards and commissions. Senator Beasley?
so really to that point, so I'm happy to wait if people have something they wanted to add to that. So I agree, we want to be careful.
Yeah.
I've gotten a couple of people who've reached out to me. And I don't know if this goes in best practices or if it goes in the law, but just with concern that the chairs of various boards and committees aren't really aware of what the open meeting law is and wondering if there should be some sort of requirement of training.
Yeah,
So education.
and I think that could fit in well with the stuff we asked the Secretary of State's office to do, and they could do it like in conjunction with the VLCT or whatever, and School Boards Association and stuff, but yeah, having some kind of guidance and training.
Yeah,
Okay, well, this is a lot, so,
That goes to the best practices.
well, like I said, I don't know that it doesn't just go within the best practices, or if we actually do want to say that there shall be an annual open meeting training for boards and commissions or whatever that is. But I did get a fair amount of concern from people who were responding to various versions of this bill with sort of that, it's not that people are maliciously not following the meeting laws, they don't know what it is.
right. And I do think that the associations, I know School Boards Association does include that in their board training, but maybe we need to make sure that gets beefed up or something.
Yeah.
Or, require that they include it, 'cause I don't think there's some legal requirement.
Well, you could have one designated person who can respond.
Senator Watson.
Yeah, I think Vermont League of Cities and Towns pretty regularly offers
Yeah.
training on open meeting law issues that people don't go.
Right, and that's why I'm wondering if there is space within this to perhaps require that, the chair of a non-advisory or someone on that board is trained at least annually.
Yeah.
Cause I think you're right, I think
Yeah.
that the trainings exist, I think people just don't go.
Right, well, and we have a city monthly ended up doing something like that, when somebody became a chair, they got a little, primer on open meeting law.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also have this sort of generalized concern about making sure that we are not overburdening some of our smallest
Bingo,
towns and
yes.
boards and commissions. That we are conscious of what they're able to handle.
And I liked it. I know we had talked at one point about, and I don't know if this is findings or if this is intent. I, to be honest, don't fully understand the relevant difference between those two concepts. But I think we were talking about as it relates to intent, but having like a step of where we'd like to see
Mhm.
eventually we get as a state, which I think our end goal is to have everything be open as often as possible in the best way possible. And I think over time, we'll see if that is remote or if that is more in person. But to at least try to move us towards the most transparent, consistent access for people, like as a goal. And I don't know what that would be, but I feel like that. I think that means having all towns be able to have online meetings as well and to record them straight live. But not to mandate it. So maybe having a goal eventually of every town having certain things. But because I don't feel comfortable right now mandating a lot of this technology. It essentially is what I feel we would be doing if we put up a requirement on hybrid meetings.
Well, that's what the bill is right now.
Exactly.
It
So,
mandates it.
I wouldn't
Yes.
mind it if we gave it timeframes
Mhm.
and money. I mean,
Exactly.
I don't think you can mandate it without, and many of these towns, small towns, are the ones requesting that we go totally remote.
So Senator Vygotsky.
So I certainly understand the balance that needs to be struck with not overburdening our small towns, and we've heard incredible stories of a lack of access to meetings, and I worry about geographic justice. So just because
Yeah.
I have a disability and live in a small town, I won't have access to my meetings, and so I do think there is a funding and way of supporting perhaps a more extended on-ramp to this, but I do not feel okay simply making a suggestion that people move in this direction because it will continue to not be universal design that allows for people to fully participate in access no matter where they live.
Senator Norris, do you have any things you wanna make sure we include or?
Well, I just have some questions
Sure, go ahead.
in certain areas, the hybrid meeting, I got to have more definition. What is a hybrid meeting? On page 5, under B3, local incidents, that who calls this, my first thought was only the county government, not the London district, but that.
Does every town have a health or safety officer that could potentially be?
No longer, we have
Oh,
removed
okay.
that, and
Never
I
mind.
mean, there is, we've transitioned that in our rental registry work to statewide, but every town should have somebody, we've transitioned the responsibilities, but maybe not the
Yeah,
job.
there still is a health officer in every town, but. Go ahead, Bob.
Sorry, I'm sorry, that's different.
Sorry. When we start talking about the $250,000 or $250,000. My concern here obviously is, let's get the active number here, I want to make this as lean as possible. I might add with what we're facing here, and I don't know if Tucker knows or not, but. I don't want to make this cumbersome upon towns as far as the storage of records or having access to records. I don't know what the law specifically says right now as far as how long does the municipality have to store video recordings and so forth of meetings? And I agree with Senator Clarkson on the concept of, staying remote. I don't know how much more transparent you can get by. We have situations, and I'm sure you all have situations also, where a lot of the select board meetings now are televised.
Yeah.
Nobody shows up to the meetings. Okay, so let's just say we could have a room off to someplace with some staffing, it's like, I don't know, I guess, could it be optional? I don't know. I mean, nobody goes to meetings no more because they're televised.
That's not my experience in my town.
But it's in the smaller towns that I live in, obviously.
Well,
I think it definitely depends on the town.
So do you know what he's looking at?
Senator Norris.
So I think, Bob, that goes, adds to the intent and findings. One of the findings, if we monitor the intent, is that to we acknowledge that during COVID, the access by being fully remote the number of participants in our town meetings has grown substantially. We have tons of data on that and that we don't want to lose that by not continuing to use our technology in effective and productive ways for our towns and just allow, we've seen all the benefits and we've also seen some of the challenges. And so I think this bill is trying at the moment to balance the yearnings to go back to something that isn't anymore, and the greenlighting a lot of our 21st century technological capabilities. So for me, this is sort of a balancing between those two, and I would hope our findings and intent would articulate that maybe better than I'm doing at the moment. And I am, even though I would love to be able to allow all remote, I have some appreciation, I'm developing appreciation for the distinctions between our having an advisory committee, commissions, a committee differential. And I just, I would hope that, and I agree with everything people have said, we need to further define hybrid and advisory. We need to create a map and a timeline, I think, for towns, smaller towns. We do not want to burden our smaller towns, many of whom are already effectively being remote at the moment. Anyway, I think we are in a good place as long as we can continue to flush this out. So I think we want, and I do think we could do some work on the annual meeting, particularly as a hybrid. And particularly with money.
Yeah.
I don't think we should abandon that for another year. I think it fits into this work and it may need a little more time.
Senator Watts is gonna be next, but one thing I hope that we will avoid, and I would like to, I don't wanna go down the rabbit hole of findings in this bill. Findings take so much time. We can state our intent, but findings are just, they don't become law, they're not part of the law. And we will spend so much time wordsmithing something that will not be law. And so I'd rather spend our time wordsmithing the law and not the findings. Everybody knows we had COVID, so we don't need to say that again. And everybody knows we had remote meetings in COVID. So I'd rather not do that. It will just spend a lot of time.
I think one of the, just to push back on that, I think one of the intent sections are often, the courts, when there's a court case, the intent section is often gone to because.
Right, I said intent
Yeah.
is fine, some findings.
And so I think in the intent, it is for me, this is one of the silver linings, the lessons learned from COVID. This bill fits under the lessons learned from COVID. So I would hope that we would, in that intent section, articulate that and also give voice to the number of participants whose participation in all these meetings was enabled by virtue of the technological advancements that they've been able to use.
Senator Watson.
Yeah, thank you. So just in answer to your question, I mean, the biggest issue for me is this issue of the timing and the implementation, as folks have said, the impact on the small towns. But I also agree that paired with money, the right amount of money, then I think we could phase it in. But it was shocking to me and of concern that not all of our municipalities even have websites, right? Like that is such a barrier, I think, to a lot of this, and just communicating with the public. So that's a big deal for me in this. I have a lot of like small things, suggestions, but on one layer higher than that, not small things. Another thing that is kind of a big deal to me is this retaining of records, and that I'll just say that I think it's important that we not make the municipalities themselves necessarily the retainers of the records, but that they are retained somewhere. That they must be they must be retained by some organization. That doesn't have to be the municipality. I'm open to talking about this, but this is a thing that I'm
Like the
worried
data
about.
archivist, is that the?
Well, like, is it okay that they're stored on YouTube? And you can just direct someone to YouTube?
Or do we
Really
need them
uncomfortable
there?
with that.
You don't have to know that.
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, no.
okay, well,
the
that's
minutes.
something we should talk about.
Yeah.
This is the minutes discussion. I mean, I think once the minutes are set and they're approved, that's the record of the
Right.
meeting.
Well, so I
I
think
don't,
this comes to what's the intent of the video,
Yeah,
and
right.
I don't think it's actually just for record, I think it's also for accountability and transparency.
Right. Okay,
So-
let's let Ann
That's
finish.
Sorry.
So, well, and that's actually something, the third thing, I was trying to keep a list of like, okay, so if we have an intent section, what would go in it? And one thing I think that I feel like I hear is like, and the goal that I have is universal design,
Hmm.
which to me speaks to that we do actually need a physical location, because that is a part of universal design. Maybe it's, the end goal, like where we hope to land, with all municipalities eventually, but then also the purpose of the recordings, like what that is, and I've got my opinions about that, and then we may not agree, that's okay, but so those are like high level the things that I'm
Okay,
thinking about and worried about for this.
Senator Norris, did I see your hand again?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention two words that come to mind when I look at this, is transparency and cumbersome. I just want the municipalities and township to be able to handle whatever comes out of it.
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Was the second word cumbersome?
Cumbersome.
yeah, so we want it to be transparent but not cumbersome, right?
Okay.
Is that?
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah,
Conflicting.
yeah,
Good word, not-
yeah, exactly. Okay, Senator White, did you have something?
No, the discussion has been I'm really enjoying the discussion.
Oh, good.
Because I actually feel like I don't have, the only thing that I feel strongly about in this entire bill is the amount of time that they have to hold on to the recordings. I do not feel that they should have to hold them past when the minutes are basically complete. And I don't know if that's been posted, we debated if it's posted or if it's approved. But I do not think that to have, or we need to change the standard for the purpose of minutes. Because why do we have a staff member typically in these towns or a clerk who is taking a record if the point of it is to not be the record of the meeting?
Mhm.
So that's the one thing that's a little bit of passion.
That's good to know what you care about
Because
the
it's not
most.
a court
so,
case.
yeah.
It's not a court case. It's like people use the people who tend to go back and watch meetings years later, I oftentimes find have some kind of reason to use it negatively rather than positively. And it feels like, yeah, that's how I feel.
Okay. Senator Vygotsky?
I guess. And I guess that raises the question to me of in 2024, is having a staff person handwrite minutes the most modern and efficient and effective way of keeping a record of the meeting?
They're usually
But-
typing on their computer.
Yeah,
Right, but we have different technology that can allow us to have a video recording and someone to go do that, like, so I guess I wonder, like, are minutes the way that we should be keeping a record of the meeting in 2024?
Ooh, that's a bigger.
yeah, that's the thing. If we're gonna change that,
That's
that's a
huge.
really big conversation.
That's.
Yeah.
I'm,
Whether you're
thinking about
Good question.
the whole definition of hybrid meeting. And we've all been, first of all, we all done all of these things, right? We've done the various versions of all these types of meetings. And I think got pretty, I'll speak for myself. I got pretty tired of just doing Zoom meetings and not seeing anybody in person. I don't think that we were as effective at our work because we couldn't see each other in person. And so I still feel pretty strongly that if we go to fully remote for a lot of things, we lose a lot.
Yeah.
And I also, the hybrid meetings can be really, a bad hybrid meeting is really frustrating for everybody and not very well done anyway. But I'm wondering if it might be beneficial to get some testimony from towns and boards that have run really good hybrid meetings.
Oh, yeah.
We keep using ourselves as an example, because I do think the legislature does do really good hybrid meetings.
We're in one now.
But we also have a fully staffed building.
Yes,
and
exactly.
really well-trained staff who are doing everything and the money to buy the nice screens and things. So I know a couple of my towns that do it well, and maybe we could come up with 3 or 4 that we could have in to help us figure out, what did they do to make it
That's a
work.
great idea.
So if you have ideas, send them to me. So we can get them in next week, to talk to us. Okay, but now I think let's, go through our list of things. And I'm really gonna ask you to be disciplined so that we're not all talking at once, because we have about half an hour. I wanna hear what you have to say, and then I'll work with Tucker to try to develop the next draft. So we can keep moving things forward. Does that sound like a good plan?
Yeah, and if
Okay.
you wanna share any of that, I'm happy to work on this bill.
Yeah,
I care about this bill.
I know.
Sir, is this the level of, are we going detailed, like we're going through the bill?
Right through this list.
Why don't we
Oh, the
go
list.
through the list?
Oh, the list,
And the super details,
I'll leave.
we can wait
Okay.
until, if the list is impacted. So actually, I'm gonna ask Tucker. Do you mind going through the list you have, and then I can facilitate it, but you can help us guide it through the list.
Good afternoon, everyone. Tucker Anderson, Legislative Counsel for the record. The first item you had on the list was, should the committee move forward with the annual meeting provisions?
Okay, I'm actually gonna
That's
put a pin in that one, so we don't start with that, because I think we could do that one or not do that one, and we can still move ahead with everything else. So let's wait until we figure out some of the other things.
the second item on your list was, what is a practical timeline for the effective date of the bill to allow time for towns to catch up to the requirements, for example, of hybrid meetings?
Mhm.
One function I just want to highlight up front that you can use here is a transitional provision. So that even though the effective date would apply July 1st, for example, for some things like emergency local incident permission to hold either hybrid or in-person only meetings could stay in place and be effective immediately, but the transitional provision, you could pick out sections or powers that would be delayed until whatever the acceptable date is.
That's a good idea. Seems to me that we're gonna need at least a year for some towns. They're gonna need to get the grant, they're gonna have to use the best practices. So I would say minimum of a year for some.
I think we're looking at a 3-year period. By the time you bring everybody needing to be on board, 2 at minimum.
Mhm.
I think 1 year is not enough. I mean, I'm thinking of, you think about your,
I mean, this is also an election, we're heading into, there's gonna be changes.
Yeah, no, I said a minimum of a year.
Okay.
I'm not sure we had 3 years, but.
yeah, but 2, I think 2 would be
So-
good.
I mean, we could do, an effective date of a January 1 too.
Yeah.
That would give us a half year, like maybe we go to 2.5.
By January 26th, let's say.
Yeah, go ahead, Tucker.
For
What were you gonna say?
purposes of clarity.
Yeah,
Putting this together for you. Would you like to fill that out for the duties related to mandatory electronic broadcast of the meetings? And the retention of records, for example? Is that what you want to build out for 2 years?
I think it's just, the retention of records and the hybrid meeting requirement, I think. Those are the 2 hard things, I think. The difference between the advisory boards and that's not as
easy.
hard,
I think.
and frankly. I would say that state boards, maybe, can we make that distinction, that state level boards have to do it?
Oh.
Sooner, because they have sounds like most of them are doing it already, so
What about school boards?
I think most school boards are already doing it too.
So I'm
but we
wondering
should-
if we can.
Well, we should let the SBA come back in and I know that Susan Glassy stopped me and said she wants to testify again on the
Okay.
bill, because she's talked to her members now. And they had some issues or concerns about the annual meeting thing, because school boards also have annual meetings.
Oh,
So,
joint, we do have joint. Is that what you mean?
No, we don't.
not all the schools do them joint, because it depends on if the town and the school district overlap, and most of them,
Oh,
yeah,
that's,
yeah.
And increasingly they
We
don't.
don't even do ours on the same day.
Yeah, a lot of them are in February, so they're different. But anyway, so I think we can figure out about schools, they are different, but I'm wondering if we have an earlier effective date for state, because
I like that.
can we draft that in, say, yeah, okay. So maybe earlier effective date for state, earlier effective date for the easy stuff, and then for the records retention and hybrid requirement, that would go out to January 1st of 2026.
I mean, that gives a year.
Let's just start there and see how we feel after we.
Yeah, I'd like to see the response. to
But I would
this.
like to hear about the school's feasibility of having an earlier effective date too. They deal with such a huge part of the town's budget.
Yeah, and they might be able to do it earlier because they're more
That's what I
sophisticated with
thought, yeah.
technology, but let's ask them, yeah. So just a note on that, and when next time we do this, let's get Sue in, thanks Olivia. Okay, what's next on our list?
Sorry, on state boards, we maybe should have somebody talk to us about state boards and how many of them. Is it worth hearing from, like the former Jason Malucci, who oversaw a lot of the state boards?
We can,
These are-
we've heard from a bunch of state boards already, every single state board we've heard from has said, oh, we already.
Right, those state boards, but I'm thinking about all the other state.
Like the Vermont Commission on Women type of thing?
Yeah.
Most of them are advisory, so
Oh, okay.
then they would be,
Right,
yeah.
aha,
Mm.
okay.
They don't
Okay,
have
how I do.
legislative, quasi judicial.
But yeah, you're right, there's a
cautionary.
bunch of those.
There
There are a ton of state boards, but
Oh.
most of them are advisory.
That's very helpful.
I mean,
And that's why you
correct me if
chose
I'm
what you
wrong, but
chose.
there are some that are not, and I tried to think of the ones.
Is there a list of boards that we can
Yes.
compare with who?
Yes.
I think, is it on our website?
Yes.
Great. That's all I need to know.
We've got our
Get a print
little
of it.
queen here doing it, yep.
Oh my
Okay.
god.
This should be like added in as the like vice chair's duties.
Google the questions.
So we should not use the corporate name. Can
No,
you
we-
search for that?
Can you online search for that? Can you Bing it?
Search 20 donut, 29.
Sorry.
Okay,
Actually, some of us think someone else with Bing.
okay,
I think of the crooner,
wait,
I'm missing Bing Crosby.
were you gonna say
Just
something,
say-
Tucker?
I was just gonna confirm that there is a list. I don't know of its accuracy because it was last compiled in 2022 and there's 300 plus on the
Yeah.
list. And
Yeah, there are a lot of them.
I can't confirm or deny how many of those 300 would meet the criteria under this bill for an advisory body.
Yeah.
But I do
That's-
know that there is one specific provision for one specific agency, Natural Resources, that states that all of their boards and commissions, except for 2, are advisory only.
That's.
This brings up a whole other area of conversation that I don't wanna get into
Oh,
right now,
Fish and wildlife
but that
boards,
is,
yeah.
that is
And
very,
the Natural Resources.
And
Board,
natural
Yeah.
resources.
all that.
this is very interesting.
Oh,
We
we've
should-
talked about
we
this
should-
already.
There's
we should
there's
hold on to
probably at least, let's say, 30 or 40, if you count the OPR licensing boards,
Mhm.
Yeah.
even more.
A lot of them.
Oh, yeah, that are not,
They
yeah,
would
that's
not
right.
be advisory because they're they
Exactly.
have quasi
They
judicial.
make decisions.
Yeah, that's a good point. I've forgotten about the OPR boards. And we can have the natural resources board in. I think you guys are doing a bill on Fish and Wildlife Board, so if you can also keep track and of the consistency with this bill, I'm just concerned about that.
Well, it sounds like they would not be in the advisory category. They would
Correct.
have to do the other.
Right, but I don't want some carve out for somebody that's
No, I-
inconsistent with this.
Well,
That's a very good
I
point.
mean, I think the bill that we're contemplating would move it to the advisory.
Okay.
Yes,
It would
so
bring
that's
them
kind of the
on.
interesting.
Got it. So, Tucker, about that issue, we did have a question and this is a question about quasi judicial. So boards, when they are in their quasi judicial function about what is required of them. Because there are carve outs for example, the PUC was in testifying and when they're in quasi judicial deliberations, they can have a closed meeting. Can you explain that to the committee and if we might need to make some adjustments in the use of the word quasi judicial?
So the open meeting law exempts deliberative meetings in relation to a quasi judicial proceeding. And it defines quasi judicial proceeding as contested cases under the APA or a case in which the legal rights of one or more persons who are granted party status are adjudicated, and which is conducted in such a way that all parties have opportunity to present evidence and to cross-examine witnesses presented by other parties, which results in a written decision, and the result of which is appealable by a party to a higher authority. Quasi-judicial proceeding the open meeting law does not here call out quasi-judicial bodies as being exempt. In fact, it's even narrower. Specifically, what is exempt from the open meeting law currently is meetings to deliberate in relation to quasi-judicial proceedings. And deliberation is very specifically defined as weighing, examining, and discussing the reasons for or against a decision in relation to that quasi-judicial proceeding, and excludes the taking of evidence in the arguments of parties.
So this is like an abatement hearing, this is that part in the abatement hearing where we're deliberating, but then you have to come out and go into open session to actually make your decision.
Or to take evidence from witnesses, or
Which is normally we start with that, okay, so that section is, okay.
So
Interesting.
by having the reference to a quasi judicial board in here, it's not contradictory to that.
Correct.
That can still remain, we can still call them quasi judicial,
yes,
Okay.
that is essentially saying that they don't get to access the special privileges of advisory bodies here. But they get to continue operating as they would under the open meeting law.
And so what about, two questions, the bill down the hall that I asked about, that's related to the Green Mountain Care Board, because apparently this is not applying to them.
Okay.
Currently, or they don't interpret it as applying to them. So there's some sections in bill in health and welfare that would make that apply to them. But it seems to me that they don't think it applies to them, but we can get that clarified, we can have them back in to clarify.
Sure.
But
What they may be getting at, and I'm aware of the language you're talking about, is eliminating any doubt as to whether those particular types of proceedings are quasi-judicial proceedings that would allow them to have deliberations that aren't subject to the open meeting law.
okay, so it's just basically clarifying what is a deliberative meeting.
It is, yeah,
Okay.
expressly stating these types of hearings are quasi-judicial proceedings. Therefore, the deliberations of the Green Mountain Care Board in relation to those specific hearings
Mhm.
are not subject to the open meeting
Okay.
law.
And then the other thing that has arisen is, we had the Human Services Board in to testify and hear about this bill, and they are also a quasi judicial board,
Mhm.
but they are a specific type of, they hear appeals for things like Medicaid eligibility or eligibility for certain human services, and they basically do it all in closed session because they have the person there, revealing private information about themselves and their finances and their health and welfare. And under this, their reading of it would be that they would have to be hybrid in those. And that's not our intent. We don't want to require them to do those in open. They basically said that they right now, and you guys correct me if I'm wrong, but they ask the person, where do you want to meet? How do you want to meet? And they'll accommodate their ability to, meet over the phone or meet on Zoom or meet in a district office or something like that. And they would like to retain the ability to do that, that they're not meetings that the public comes to.
This is the HR board.
The Human Services Board, yeah,
I'll have to review the testimony that the committee received to give you some accurate feedback, but it's possible that either they have a specific exemption covering those sorts of meetings, or possibly that they're going into executive session. And in either case, this shouldn't subvert their ability to do that, but I will check and
okay,
make sure that you don't inadvertently capture otherwise confidential hearings.
okay, that would be great, because it doesn't sound like they're actually going into executive function, or session, because they're not meeting first and then say, now we're gonna go private. They just start with the person in private.
There might be something in the Administrative Procedures Act that also specifically. sort of
Okay. All right.
receipt
They
of testimony.
they redact their stuff in their decisions as well, so they're
Yeah.
legally allowed to do that, so I don't know if it.
Yeah, so we just wanna make sure, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we all agree, we don't want to mess with them and make them do anything in public. So if we can just make sure that we're not hurting that confidentiality piece. So you have a speak?
My question on some of that piece is, would HIPAA not? Like, if they're reviewing medical information, wouldn't HIPAA protect that information and automatically carve it out of this?
I think if they're revealing actual medical
Yeah.
records, but it's not all medical
Okay.
records, some of
Right,
it
'cause
is, it's a
fuels
whole
and
bunch
things,
of
yeah.
things, yeah, so.
And then I guess my other question along that line is the appeals process, is that quasi judicial deliberation? Does it get captured in the same thing that is worth?
Well, they are the appeal body, so if, for example, Diva, says, no, you're not eligible for Medicaid, and the person thinks they're eligible for Medicaid, they appeal the decision to the Human Services Board. So they're hearing appeals of denials. And I think their decisions are final and not appealable, but they might be appealable to the court. I don't know. Did you just look that up? Or do you know?
I did not, I was scanning something else to
Okay.
prepare for
I don't know that we need to know that, but I think that they
future
are
response to these questions.
final decisions from the Human Services.
Got it, okay.
Yeah. Okay, so that was one thing I wanted to note to make sure. Okay, so. So we figured out maybe a path of timeline. We figured out. We got off on a little bit of a tangent there, but I think it was important tangent. What's next on the list?
Secretary of State grants,
Okay.
timing, needs, context, and dollar amount.
Right, okay, so I had written in here that we wanted to involve a few other entities in these best practices. And,
And costs, knowledge of what it might cost.
right, well, that's a separate question, but the Secretary of State's office would be in charge of this thing, but in consultation right now, we have VLCT and VSBA. There was a possibility of naming the Vermont Access Network as being involved in it because of their.
Yes, because they
video
record so many
expertise.
of these meetings already.
The other one was the AG's office because they're the ones that are they enforce. Right, they're the enforcement.
Open meeting law violations can be enforced by the AG.
Okay, so I think the Secretary of State's office actually said maybe we should also include the AG's office, but we should also have them into Olivia. And then I've had and others, so I don't know who we thought about as others, but we could also just say and other relevant stakeholders, and that captures a lot of.
Well, the LCT might be able to identify. You're not wanting to talk about cost yet, because I think Kevin Moore would be our best witness on cost, and also a town that actually has done it, like talking about Hartford, and finding out how much they spent to boot themselves up.
Yeah, the only issue with this conversation is I don't believe we heard from the voting folks or the organization that does our JAM, our CATV, those folks, they are actually essentially covering a lot of the cost. So I don't know,
They're on the list.
yes, but I don't know how we would come up with that figure by just asking our towns. That's the only thing, because
Okay.
they aren't actually
So
taking the full.
Kevin Moore would give us a pretty good sense of what it would cost to put together a very, simple starter hybrid kit for a town.
Why are we asking the Agency of Digital Services? I mean, I know he talked about technical support for towns. Could they be coming up with this versus?
Well, Kevin
We can,
was
how, I'm gonna talk to JFO about, but they will then talk to the people they need to talk to
Okay.
get the money, that's their job, so. I think that, and also, I don't think we need to appropriate all in one year how much we need, because if we're giving people extra time, there are multiple years that they could do it. Also, it's not just for the equipment, it's also for the training.
Yeah.
You know, making sure people know how to use the equipment. So I will ask JFO to see if they can start working on something for us. Senator Watson, I'm sorry.
Thank you. I just wanted to note that one of the things that I am worried about in this grant is that people would use it for, ongoing costs, things like data storage or for, paying for a website if they say they have.
Do you want them not to be able to, or
Well,
to
You
be able
want
to?
them to be able to do as much.
I'll just flag that I'm worried about that because this is one-time money. And it should be, I think it should go to one-time.
Yes. Okay. One time,
So, sorry, kind of just,
yeah, you wanna counter that, but.
No, I just wanna tag-
What's that, Senator Bukowski's got her hand up, let's.
It's okay, if Senator
that's okay.
Clarkson wants to count, mine is back to the, who should be on the advisory.
Oh,
We
okay.
skipped over that.
Okay, we'll get back to that, so.
I was just gonna say, it's a one-time cost, but it's an ongoing tool. It's, you know, you may be helping them buy equipment, but it's a tool that will enable them to do ongoing work. So you wanna make sure that enables them to do all the things that we're asking them to do.
Right, I agree. And so what I'm saying is like paying for helping to set up the website, cool. Paying for the yearly annual subscription, I'm not sure.
Okay,
Alright, I see what you mean.
yeah, so, cause if yes, we wanted them to budget for that kind of thing, yes. Okay, well, I will talk with JFO about the numbers, so we don't continue to speculate on who might know. Who else do you think we should have?
So in terms of the best practices, I need someone to speak to disability access. It's gonna be really important developing best practices.
So which disability organization would we wanna?
I mean, the sort of two that come to mind are either BCIL or Disability Rights Vermont. But I don't know which one would be best, but I do think that as we're talking about best practices, we wanna make sure, so, especially given that one of our intents is universal design, that we're inclusive of that voice.
Absolutely.
Okay,
And they testified DCIL.
Yeah.
So,
I think that
They're
probably
already
makes the most sense, I just don't know. So they sort of want.
okay, we will, I just write that down, we'll try to figure out
Mhm.
which one is the best one, okay.
Or maybe we have a state board or someone, but I think what we heard from our folks, from at least from the deafblind community, is we don't have someone at the state level really making sure that that's happening.
Yeah. Okay. What else was in this area of the grants? It was the amount, the who, and is there a third thing?
Open meeting law education.
Oh, and then we
Education.
wanted to have sort of,
who pays the education?
I mean, the education exists through VLCT, I don't know if it costs money.
well, the towns pay for it with their dues to VCI,
Oh, okay.
the VLC.
Yeah,
But it
Yeah.
costs VLCT to send out a trainer or not. Maybe they may already have this covered. So
They already do
maybe-
this. I know that VLCT and VSBA already train on the open meeting law. I've done the VSBA training. You've probably done the VLCT training, so they do it, and you too. They do it. I don't want them to come in here and tell us they need money for something they already do. So, at the state level though, I'm not sure that the state level boards have the training in it. And so that's one thing I could ask the Secretary of State's office if they can provide that training. So,
yeah, I think my question in here is just, do we wanna require that training on an annual basis for those boards? Cause what Senator Watson pointed to is that it exists, but people don't go. And I certainly have gotten multiple complaints from constituents that ultimately came down to like, nobody on the board actually knows what open meeting, like what the open meeting law is.
yeah, I mean, at the very least, the chairs of the boards should take this.
Ooh, yeah, no,
I'm
that's
open
not
to
what I
that,
meant.
because then they're the ones that are responsible for making sure you follow the law.
That is actually the note that I had, is require open meeting law training for chairs
Yeah,
of non-advisory boards.
all right, well, let's maybe think about, let's put that in and get some testimony. I'm sure there'll be strong feelings about that.
I'm sure.
I thought so.
Yeah, okay, sure, go ahead.
Well, so I'm for that, I think I would want to tailor just a little bit to say that it they need to be provided the information, like it needs to be given to them. I don't, making them go to a training and get a certificate or something feels like too much to
Yes,
keep track of.
They're all like volunteers with,
Right.
you know, and then of course, do we have it all the advisory boards or just the?
Right.
I
you know.
specifically had not any of the non-advisory boards, the higher level board.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
Like, that was my suggestion, was the chairs of those quasi judicial budgetary.
So select board chairs and school board chairs
Yes.
and.
Well, then I go with those
board
better.
chair,
Yeah.
things like that, but.
That'd
But
be-
no, the garden club does not.
It's not.
It's the parks.
Okay,
I feel like we're belittling garden clubs, and as an active and enthusiastic member of my garden club, which is not part of our town. Parks Commission, the
We're
energy.
making fun of ourselves from last session over.
Oh, right.
I guess I would add like that, we have, I recall, I mean, having open meeting, the most open meeting law issues with those advisory groups.
no, that's not who I'm getting complaints about.
Oh, really? Okay.
It is specific, it is
But
not
if
who I'm
it's-
getting complaints about,
if
it's
it's
select
just
boards and
the-
school boards and.
Yeah, if it's just that, I am fine with saying you must,
Yes, it
the
is,
chairs must do it.
okay, no, that is all I'm suggesting, like, my note from last week quite literally says, for the chairs of the non-advisory boards, the higher
That's-
level.
Okay, I wanna stop just 1 second, check in on agenda, so we have hopefully a witness coming at 2, or maybe a witness coming at 2 on a different bill. Via Zoom, so we can either continue this conversation, cause we're on a roll. Or stop and do hear testimony from AHS on the HS reorg bill. What is the
I
committee's
think it's more
preference?
valuable to continue this.
Okay, what do you guys think?
I feel like I can pivot when it's time to pivot.
I don't have a strong feeling one way or the other.
Alright, Bob, do you wanna continue this discussion or move to another bill?
Oh, this is so exciting.
Okay. I think we're gonna stick with this bill, if you say
Say
so,
that
let's.
with conviction.
Yeah, 15, usually we'll come in 15 minutes, we'll do 15 more minutes, cause you probably have to go too, right, Tucker?
I think.
He still doesn't have electricity,
He
so
thinks
it's.
Wait, you don't have electricity?
No, just, a Starksburg is like ongoing.
Okay, all right, chairs of those non-advisory boards, we might want to consider requiring something, training, or at least here's the open meeting law, read this
Right.
document.
Do this.
Well, Can I just answer this?
Yeah. Go
So
ahead.
I want you to go back to John O'Gwin, one of our national experts on remote meeting, on, education and distributed teams, how we manage distributed teams effectively. And I would say we need to make managing, remote meetings are just as hard to often manage. I think we need training available and we need some kind of encouragement for anyone who's managing a meeting, either remotely or hybrid. They both can be a challenge. And they both need education. It doesn't just happen naturally. So
Yeah,
a distributed team is a very different thing than being able to touch you and say, have it aside.
okay,
But it's, so anyway, I would say, we strongly encourage and, maybe have a couple carrots for actually doing it, but
Gold
remember,
stars.
boards chairs change all the time.
yeah.
I just-
All right, we're gonna put that in there for discussion and.
Yeah.
Okay, what's the next?
I just wanted
Oh,
to
go
clarify the training, I think we absolutely should encourage training for managing a hybrid meeting, but the training I was talking about requiring was about open meeting law.
Oh.
Yeah, yeah, I think it can be combined.
I think it
you know,
could be easily
You know, meeting and management and open meeting law or something like that. Okay, that's good enough on this section, I think. What's the next thing on our list? The
Local incident.
local incident, okay.
Who
So-
calls and better defined.
Yeah, so in the case of. Well, so in the case of school boards, for example, right now, there's a school's closed, the
Yeah.
superintendent is responsible for it. Ultimately, I think under the law is school, is superintendent. But they're not a member of the school board. And then similarly, towns that have a town manager, they could do it, and they often do that function, but they're not in the board. So do we want to have it be the staff or the board chair? Oh, it seems like it, or both.
I think it should either be, depending on whether a town has, I would think it would be the town manager. And or the chair of the select board. And or the superintendent, some of these boards will. Have the superintendent do it.
Mhm.
I mean, they already have a chain of command on this, cause they make local incident decisions all the time.
Yeah,
But empowering the town manager and or the chair of the select board, everybody has one of those or both, or whether it's the town manager, the mayor, or the. Well, in your case, anyway, I think that those are already positions that are empowered to do a lot of other things. I
is
think
there a
getting-
general term for those things, like the chair or the?
Certainly for some of them, the one thing that I would flag is maybe a clause that catches more of those, officers, chief officers of the public body. I'll try to figure out some sort of
Whatever,
term. My question is whether you want, for example, you bring up the chair of the select board, is that for all of the other municipal public bodies? Is the local incident being called for all of them? I'm not certain if every municipality, for example, has all of their public bodies meeting in the same designated physical location, or whether they have separate facilities. I know that even in my small town, the library meetings are at the library, they're not at the municipal
Right.
offices.
I think most towns have them in different places, yeah, lots of different places. So, I mean, for the advisory boards, the whole point of the local incident is to say that a meeting is either gonna be. The meetings that are supposed to be hybrid are either gonna be all remote or all physical. Because of a local incident. So for the advisory boards, it's not as much of an issue, right? Because those could be either without a problem. So, but, I mean, like the development review boards, for example, for a town, that is more than advisory. That would count for the hybrid requirement, and so,
cause they're quasi judicial,
yeah, and so I would think that you would want
the chair. of
the
board.
chair or the town manager. So
Yeah.
for each of the chair of the town manager, the chair or the superintendent, and at the state level, the chair or and the executive director or whatever, cause there's.
For the chair of the board, cause they each have boards.
Yeah, that's what I said, the chair or the director that's in charge, like the Green Mountain Care Board, there's an executive director of the Green Mountain Care Board, and for the Public Service Department, there's a commissioner. And there's a chair of the board, so we want it just to be the chair, or do we want the staff to be able to do it too? Senator
I
Watson.
think I have two thoughts. One is, in terms of what we call those people, at least, the term that I've heard is highest elected officer.
Right, because for towns that have mayors too.
Yeah, right, and that also encompasses the selection chair. But my thought is that, and like, I don't. I'm not gonna die on this hill, my inclination would be actually to not let the select board chair or the mayor or whoever have that power, to have it be the town clerks or the
Ooh, I like that.
or the city manager, and the reason is because the highest elected officer is also inherently political, and so in order to like avoid the abuse of this is a meeting that'd be really great if we could just do this, all remotely, whereas the staff person theoretically should be more objective, they're not the ones voting, and so ideally they would have just the safety of people in mind beyond the politics. So that's my.
I totally hear that. And the town managers usually work for the select board.
I like the town clerk.
The town clerk doesn't go to all the meetings though. but
Cause I hear both of your points about like the select board inherently is political and I certainly can see instances, actually, I have seen them happen. Where they're like, actually, we're gonna hold this one all in person because we know X, Y, and Z won't come.
Yeah.
And I also, to your point, see that the town manager works for the select board and could be
yeah,
pressured in a direction.
putting them into an
Yeah.
awkward position.
Yeah, just-
Okay, let's think on this one. I hear you. Let's,
I
Go
can
ahead.
draft it so that you have choices
Choices,
along what you
perfect.
brought up here.
Ooh.
perfect. Thank you,
Um,
Tucker. And in terms of the definition of a local emergency,
Incident.
we,
I did review some of the comments and feedback
Yeah.
about the definition, including some of the comments from the VAB, Vermont Association of Broadcasters, and I was able to catch Mike Donahue's comments and some other folks who were talking about defining the local incident. One of the things that I wanted to clarify for purposes of your conversation right now, that is currently defined in a way where the list is non-exhaustive. So it isn't going to tie the body to, declaring this incident based on inches of rain falling. It's tied to the last clause. An event that directly impedes the ability of the body to hold a meeting electronically or in a designated physical location.
yeah,
That's the limiting factor, is that there's a direct impediment to the ability to even hold the meeting in one of those two instances,
Mhm.
regardless of what the cause is, so that they're not tied to specific types of events. It's just that among this non-exhaustive category or list of events, if it impedes the ability to hold an electronic or in-person meeting, they're able to declare the local incident and pivot.
Mhm. Right, and I think that's good. I like that. And, Senator White.
Thank you, Madam Chair, but like what, the definition of impedes? Like, what is,
We don't have power at the town hall and we can't hold the electronic portion of the meeting.
so
or
it's just,
telecommunications
but
services.
impedes is not like a like there's not. Cause impedes could, I think, have many, I think that's where I have questions, so it's a non-exhaustive list, you said, so but there is a list that you can kind of refer to
Right.
as an
Weather event,
example, okay.
Public health emergency, public safety, loss of power, telecommunication services, and then there's the, I can always mispronounce this, but the iusdem generis clause, which means it relates to those preceding things and anything that is similar to the preceding list.
Okay.
So it says, or similar event.
And you would consider, because you didn't list out bomb threat. But that you feel with that principle
I would
probably
assume
an
absolutely.
example.
Falls under
Yeah.
Public safety, yeah. There's a
Makes
bomb
sense.
threat at town hall, you're gonna go remote.
Okay, so that feels actually very well defined to me, if that's cool.
Yeah,
We might not need to do a
I,
lot of work on that.
yeah, I think it's fine. Senator Yoski.
I don't think I personally have much of an issue, but the concern that I heard is actually that it wasn't tightly defined. And that the impediment could be open to interpretation.
Yeah.
That could again be abuse.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I don't know, I can't think of anything, because again, it was a concern I heard, is that there actually isn't a narrow, like, or a defined enough what is an impediment, is it that I.
The
No.
chair doesn't like to drive at night.
Yes,
It is an impediment for the chair to hold the meeting because he does not.
so we're gonna be remote.
No,
Yeah,
but
like
it,
that's, not that
Yeah.
I've ever heard that, but.
yeah, I mean, I think there's always the possibility that things could be abused, but I don't think that we wanna have it such a tight definition that we don't cover all the things that we aren't thinking about right now,
I guess I wonder if we can more, like, define somewhere what we mean by directly impedes. And rather than make a more exhaustive list, really clarify, so it's less open to subjectiveness of like, well, I think this is a direct impediment. We have said like, this is what it means to be directly impeded.
A bridge is out, there's an ice storm, I mean, there.
Well, not like that. I don't mean
It's-
making a list of suggestions of like what it is, but
Well, the other suggestion we got, I was like, how can you read my writing, but I did, was to mirror it after the going into executive session. so that, you know how you have to say, we're going into executive session for, we're technically supposed to cite the law, I think.
Mhm.
And say, or, to discuss, contract negotiations, or to discuss a personnel matter. So they would have to say, we are meeting fully remotely because of a public safety threat
Yeah.
at the town hall, or we're
Mhm.
meeting
I get
fully
that.
in person because, the, internet is out in town, or whatever it is. So can we do that?
I think that's
Yes.
great.
And
Okay.
perhaps that would be good to add, it's on page 6, but in subdivision D4, the requirement for posting a notice that the
Mhm.
meeting will be held
yeah,
exclusively in one of
okay.
those two forms, to maybe change that to shall publicly announce
Mhm.
as a definition that requires submission of the notice to essentially all media that serves the area.
Mhm.
And with, and I'll add this in, a reason or the basis for.
Yeah.
Yeah, then if it continues to happen that they're meeting fully remotely and the real reason is because the chair doesn't like to drive at night, then there's a public record of them saying, coming up with random excuses every meeting.
That's exactly,
And
a
then I think that
little
might
accountability.
accountability, yes.
I like that.
Okay, that's great. And then I see you have a comment. One
Oh,
thing
no.
before I forget, I have another thing here. I actually wrote down the statutory citation, so you might have said this, Tucker, but 1 VSA section 312(3)(c). Allow all emergency meetings to be remote is somebody's
Yes.
suggestion, that if we need to hold an emergency meeting, we need to be able to do it fast, we can do it remotely.
That's a great
I like it.
So I can't remember whose suggestion that was, but we're all good with that one?
Mhm.
Okay,
312, because I have A3, we have A3 at the top of the page.
I don't know if that's the correct citation, but I wrote it down. So you said it. And those are the meetings that are like last minute meetings, there's some really
The
emergency
dam's gonna
thing.
break.
Yeah. And so that would be
Yes.
permitted.
I think that's a great addition.
If we
Senator
do, yeah,
Watson.
if we do this, you have to have a finding of like why you're meeting.
Yeah.
either fully remotely or whatever, and then I'm fine with with the select board chair, I'm fine with it.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
so,
the HEO,
okay, well, let's,
listed officer.
let's,
Oh, did we land on language while I was?
No,
getting-
I'm just suggesting.
I'm still a little queasy about the highest elected officer,
Okay.
because I think pretty serious decisions can be made before that
Yes.
public record trail is.
yeah, let's have it drafted and we'll come back to this conversation.
What happened to page like the town manager?
I think right now we have it drafted that either, or we're gonna have it drafted that
Okay,
either
either
that
one.
can do it, and then
Okay,
we'll
great.
continue this conversation, get some more testimony on it and see how we're
Great.
feeling.
And I
Okay,
I love how much faith you have in me that it was already drafted.
it's already drafted, Tucker's like super fast. And I think right now, if you can keep that list, and you and I can talk more, and Senator Clarkson. I think the next time we have this on our agenda is Wednesday. So, we will come back to this and our decisions, but we have a witness meeting, so I don't wanna.
before Tucker goes though, don't you think, and after Friday afternoon?
Chocolate? Oh, did you see his?
Yes.
He's-
Everybody have a chocolate.
Yes, 100%.
And for.
Oh,
Aaron.
Shayla, you're sorry you're not here in person. We have chocolate.
might actually.
Oh, my.
Mike and
goodness.
I was totally gonna come in person.
That's the one thing you don't get when you're remote.
We have chocolate and cookies. All right, Tucker, thank you so much, and,
Does the key is on the bottom. You don't need a key.
I'm blind, yeah.
Okay, so to be continued on open meeting law. Thanks, you guys, that was a great discussion. I feel like we're
Thank you,
making
Tucker.
progress. And we are now gonna shift gears a little bit, because,
You get one too.
Yeah, I know, you're like, wait a
The
minute,
health-
ma'am.
The health advocate needs one.
Yeah.
We know how improved. health-
It's so Yeah.
We got this for you.
Thank you. That's so
It's
dramatic.
like a whole bag.
Yeah.
And actually I had one there.
You should just put them in your drawer.
Maybe I will.
Yeah,
I don't know the
I
deal.
don't know.
that
I
was
got it
for
in my
our,
drawer for you.
our celebration
That's
yesterday.
yesterday.
You were.
Yes, that's
you were with
amazing.
us.
But they're
Thank you.
very
I
good.
super appreciate that.
Okay. Hi Sheila, thank you for your patience with our Friday afternoon chaos, but, we are gonna now, thank you. We are gonna move on to, S 183, which is the planning for AHS administration reorganization. And so if you wanna grab that bill, if you have it, I don't actually know where the copy is, but we are going to hear from Shayla Livingston from the Agency of Human Services. So Shayla, if you wanna just, I know this is your first time coming in on the bill, you're actually our first witness on the bill, we've just done a little walkthrough. I think we're gonna, hopefully you'll just ignore the findings in your, cause I don't wanna go through and have lots of debate about the findings. We're more interested in the policy part of it, so, if you wanna just, we're gonna introduce ourselves, cause you're not usually in this committee, so, you know me, Ruth Hardy, Addison District.
Olivia Parkman, my name is Snap.
Senator Rebecca White, Windsor County District.
This is Tanya Vihotsky, Chittenden Central.
Bob Norris, Franklin County and Halbert.
And Watson, for the Washington District.
Wonderful. They're kind of just. Long time no see.
All right,
I'm
Thank-
Shayla Livingston. I'm the Policy Director for the Agency of Human Services. And thank you for having me. And it's nice to see many of you again and meet a couple of you. Senator, I am happy to just speak broadly to the bill, if that's okay. I was not planning on doing a sort of section by section of it. Okay.
okay,
I
perfect.
think I see you nodding over the flower.
Yes, yes.
So I want to start by saying that the agency is very open and willing to have a conversation with this committee and work on this bill with the committee. But I do want to start by explaining some of the benefits that we see of the agency being full. So federally, as well as in research right now, social determinants of health are emerging more and more as the main drivers, in many cases, of healthcare costs and healthcare outcomes. And those social determinants are often treated or addressed by a whole multitude of the departments underneath the agency structure as it stands today. You can see this in a variety of different spaces. Federally, an example that you will see come across your desks, hopefully this session, is the Medicaid 1115 waiver. And before your eyes glaze over there, that is just the state's agreement with the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid on how we use our Medicaid program here in Vermont. And we're going to ask to reopen that agreement that we've negotiated. We normally do it once every 5 years, but we're going to ask to open it early so that we can try to get authority to pay for individuals who are incarcerated 90 days before they're released with Medicaid coverage, as well as residential costs in our residential treatment centers, and potentially some housing costs for those individuals on Medicaid for limited periods of time. Those examples are all issues and treatment or a variety of different programs that are in departments that are not DVHA, the Department for Vermont Health Access, or the Health Department. When we look at our response to the COVID-19 pandemic, that response was, obviously there was mistakes made, but in terms of the response of the state of Vermont to that pandemic and the Agency of Human Services, the coordination and level of collaboration that we were able to leverage as one agency was critical in any number of instances. How we worked with corrections to respond, how we worked with long-term care to respond, the health department's integration within each of our other sister departments, and the way that helped support the efforts across the agency just came forward again and again and again at that time. Our response to the opioid crisis and the continued and ongoing work that we do in each of the departments with opioid use disorder treatment and response. Again, just seeing the health department having full integration with those other departments. An awesome example of that is in Hireability Vermont in Dale, seeing them work on a vocational rehabilitation program directly related to folks who are in recovery from opioid use. And then you'll see another issue hit your desks hopefully this year. The agency is looking at funding a psychiatric residential treatment facility for youth, and that's 4 different departments working on that right now. It's Medicaid, it's Dale, it's DCF, it's DMH. Sorry, and I should not use the acronyms. It is Department of Mental Health, Department for Disabilities, Aging and Independent Living, Department for Vermont Health Access, and Department for Children and Families. So we just see these initiatives more and more actually pushed together, especially as our providers in our communities of all different types and stripes are struggling with workforce. The more we can coordinate and streamline and work as one agency to reduce that impact, the better. Not saying we do that perfectly every time, but those are some of our benefits. And when we think of that big value, that like sort of big theoretical value of an agency, what we're trying to do is align our mission, vision, and values to provide flexibility in our budgeting and policy decisions across the programs, regardless of the department they're in, and more focused on the client base in our communities. That, of course, is a goal, but we are often asked to work together, often asked to de-silo, and there are some benefits there of having all the departments in one agency. Nationally, you're seeing a mix. Some states are pulling their agencies apart. Some states are pushing their departments together. We are seeing more states push departments together. And a lot of this shift, just so everyone understands, has come after the pandemic and the COVID-19 pandemic, and states responding and reacting to how that did or didn't work for them in those instances. All right, that's the end of my general response. What would be very helpful to the Agency of Human Services is to understand the issues that your committee is trying to address, so that when we do this work on this response and this report, we actually address those issues in our response and focus our energy on solving the problems that we want to solve together. So the end of my testimony is a question, which is what are those issues, and therefore how can I then take that back and figure out the best way to integrate that into a report at the end of this work.
Excellent.
And I'm happy to take questions, obviously.
Great, thank you so much, Shayla, and thanks for explaining the acronyms. Anybody outside of the world, like my morning committee is acronym central, really. So are there any committee questions for Shayla at this point, or Senator White?
Thank you, Madam Chair. To be frank, I don't know a lot about the pros and cons of how to restructure this department. However, what I heard from the bill introducer that stuck in my head was when Senator Kitchell was explaining that we are trying to do too much under one roof, and that there would be more accountability potentially for separation, because you have a person who's able to speak to maybe a particular issue, but now it can feel a little bit like a black hole of not necessarily having the right people in the right places. So I don't have a specific, I thought your question was really good, Ms. Livingston, around what are the reasons for the ask of this bill, and that was a reason that I heard articulated. So I was wondering if you could respond to it.
Absolutely. So accountability. So I'm going to write it down and let you take it back. But I will say that is, right now, my immediate response is unrelated to this bill. I hope deeply that we are accountable to you all. We do have a commissioner as the head of each department. They each in turn have division directors in their departments. If I broke it up today, right? Theoretically, those people would not change. Those people would remain in those 6 departments. You would add, right, a new secretary, you would add a new secretary's office, but you would still have that commissioner level department structure. I'm gonna take 1 second and Chair, please tell me not to do this if you don't want me to describe the agency structure and the departments they're in. Would that be helpful?
Oh, no, that would be really helpful. Yeah, go ahead.
Should have started there. All right, so the Agency of Human Services is very large, as the bill describes. We are about half of state government. There are 6 departments under the agency. Right now, that agency office, so the individuals in the central office for the Agency of Human Services, it's fairly limited, especially compared to the departments themselves. We mainly have the executive level staff. We have a Medicaid policy director because we are the Medicaid entity in the state, and we have healthcare reform. There's not a lot of program currently sitting directly under us. Other than that, we have field services directors in every district, but we don't run a lot of programs out of this agency office. The 6 departments are Department of Corrections, Department for Disabilities, Aging and Independent Living, Department for Children and Families, Department of Vermont Health Access, Department of Mental Health, and Department of Health. Right now, in this very moment, we are actually moving the health department, who has traditionally been located in Burlington, down to the Waterbury office complex, which is where all of our central office staff for all of the departments sit. We then have satellite offices in districts and district offices for almost every single department in the agency. So each of those departments has a commissioner. Only the secretary in central office sits on the governor's cabinet. So that's the sort of distinction between a secretary and a commissioner is your cabinet status. If you split them, the departments, and added a secretary, right, you would then have 2 secretaries on that cabinet. The other big difference is budget. So we are that Medicaid entity right now. We are one entity over those 6 departments. So corrections gets Medicaid money. They all get Medicaid money somewhere, right? Somehow. And when we have shifts in how the federal government reimburses Vermont for Medicaid, right? When that budget swings different ways, that funding is spread across those 6 departments. It would be interesting if you broke them, how that would work. Because that, while it's still obviously one governor's budget, you then have 2 agencies controlling what is the Medicaid system for the state. So again, you're looking at 6 departments right now. That's 6 commissioners, 1 secretary, a smaller secretary's office, staff, not running a lot of programs.
Okay, Shayla, that's really helpful. Can you send us your org chart for the agency? Send it to Olivia so we can post that. I mean, I'm the only one on the healthcare committee in this room, so I know how you're structured, but I'm glad that you asked that, Senator White, because I think that's a good place to start. So we know what we have now, and then if we want to change that. Senator Clarkson.
So Shayla, this is the first time, I know your 6 departments, but it's the first time I saw the unifying theme. They all have to deal with Medicaid. I mean, that is one of their uniting factors. I mean, all departments deal with families, humans, lots of issues. But I hadn't thought about it that way, actually. And every single one of your departments are totally Medicaid dependent in one way or another. I mean, it's just an interesting piece of unifying the knits those departments together in your behemoth of an agency. So your total budget is 4.2 billion, is that right? Over 4 billion?
My CFO doesn't let me quote those numbers. on the record. I think so. It's close to that. But I don't want to say a number. I will get it wrong.
It's in the public document, right? But if it's half of state government, is it half of state government in terms of employees, or is it half of state government in terms of numbers?
I can get you the slide that we used for the secretary's introduction to budget has exactly those numbers. And I will send those to Olivia so that I do not misquote you on that here. I think it is both, Senator, but let me get you the.
Okay.
Yeah, I think Shayla, it might be a good to, the next time we have you in, to have a sort of overview of the agency, maybe with some slides that would give people a visual and sort of understanding of how things are structured right now and who does what.
Can I just add a second thing?
Yep, go ahead.
Which is, for such a huge agency, I have to say, you used to have, and you still sort of have, but you've made them less effective because you've given them bigger territories. But you used to have a go-to AHS person for legislators to deal with. So now for me in my neck of the woods, it's Sue, it'll pop in a minute. Who can
The
deal.
field services director, Sue. Yep.
Yeah, but who can de-silo, when I have a family that has a kid in corrections, but has mental health and aging issues, they can de-silo and sometimes court issues, but they don't deal with the courts so much. But they can de-silo and help us move forward on solving those families' problems. And they're able to de-silo them. I mean, it began, anyway, they're very helpful. They're kind of like AHS navigators for legislators. And
I didn't know this.
each district, they,
Very helpful.
I mean,
I was like, I don't have any idea what you're talking about.
what do we call them, Shayla?
So they are field service directors.
Thank you.
Oh,
I'm gonna-
They're fabulous. Sue Graff is ours. So,
What is their field service director?
field service directors, they used to have, they used to not have such large service areas and therefore were in some ways a little more responsive and a little more helpful. But they have been, for me as a legislator, solving problems for my constituents. They have been extremely helpful in making this huge behemoth of an agency function for for our families. Just saying.
That's really good to hear. They still very much exist. I just dropped into the chat the link to our website that has their names, their districts, and their phone numbers. And they are awesome.
yeah.
Thank you.
So I think, Shayla, can you talk a little bit of I think just to follow up on something that Senator White was saying earlier, is that one of the drivers of this is that the sense that it's too big and too difficult for one individual and one secretary's office to sort of manage. And that as, you know, when the agency was started many, many years ago, the Medicaid program was actually really, really small. It was almost nothing, you know, in the late 60s or whatever. And then, you know, Department of Health, and there wasn't a mental health and Department of Health. There weren't all the things that we have now. And as human services have grown, as healthcare reform has happened and things have changed, things have just gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. And so I'm wondering if you could speak to that, or if you feel like that has been a problem for the agency and its ability to function.
So I guess the two things I want to make clear to this committee are myself, the secretary, and the deputy secretary. Our time in these positions has been, it's 2.5 years right now. So in terms of that evolution of the secretary's office itself, I'm gonna be limited. I have worked within the agency for over a decade. And I think that when we think about, is one person managing it, how is it to coordinate for these 6 departments? to the point, and I just want to be clear, there are many, many, many programs, and there are many, many, many things within AHS and the departments that are not funded by Medicaid. So I don't want to have you leave this committee room being like, oh, everything's funded by Medicaid. That's not true. So I just want to make sure that's very true. To your point, Senator Clarkson, every department runs something that has Medicaid involvement or Medicaid funding in some manner or other to different degrees. I think the thing that will not change, no matter what you do with the structure of the agency or the departments, is that for Vermonters, for a client, even for me, when I am accessing services for myself and my family, right? I don't care. I don't care that you're from the Department for Children and Families Economic Services Division versus the Department for Disabilities, Aging and Independent Living, Higher Ability, Vermont, whatever. I don't know the acronyms. I don't know the program. I don't know the funding source. It doesn't matter. I need it to work for me and my family right now. I have a problem. And that's not going to change. And the programs themselves, in terms of what our federal constraints or, any state constraints, the state constraints are easy to change. The federal constraints are harder. Those are the issues. It's not necessarily the who is on top coordinating it, and it won't change. That person will still need, to Senator Clarkson's point, that field services director to be like, oh yeah, no. You need this thing over here from Dale, and you need this thing over here from DOC, and it's really cool. This thing over here at the health department, they just started it. That will help you, right? That's not gonna change. You're still gonna need that person or that system that can speak together to help the client in the moment, regardless of how it's structured up top.
Yeah.
Is there accountability in the system? I really like that as one of our founding questions for the report and the deliverable back. And what I started to say and then stopped myself because I realized I hadn't explained the structure is, I hope so. I sure hope right now that you have accountability and that we have accountability to you and to our clients through those commissioners, through those deputy commissioners, right? And those, again, are the people who would still be there and still be available to you. So when we present an agency budget, we don't just send in the secretary. She's amazing. She's very smart. There's no way she could retain all the details of the budgets in her head. So she goes in and she gives an overview, and then each department comes in, right? And each committee of jurisdiction drills that department. That would change, right? That would stay. So like for accountability to you all, that would stay. For accountability to the client, that would stay, right? You would still be appealing to the commissioner and then appealing to the Human Services Board and then appealing to whatever the next one is, right? That kind of accountability structure would maintain itself over time. The coordination of the work, each secretary that sat on the cabinet, if it were two agencies, would be able to get more into the details of those department budgets, of that department work. You can ask the commissioners if they want that or not. They would be able to do that and report that out in a different way potentially. But then they would have to coordinate with each other and force those departments to coordinate with each other in a different way.
Yeah. Okay. Senator Biehoski.
Thank you, and thank you, Shayla. I would agree with you that the person on the ground needs the systems to work. And what I experience as a social worker who's helping people to try to navigate these systems is, for a huge number of people, it is not working right now. They find it cumbersome, confusing. They don't know how to navigate the pieces. They don't see that the pieces are fitting together. And there is a real sense that there is not accountability to actually making those things work for the everyday people trying to access the services. And certainly I know in my community, in multiple different conversations over the last year, what has kept coming up is this agency is just too big. And so I agree with you wholeheartedly that the day-to-day person just needs the system to work, but it isn't.
Are there other questions right now for Shayla I didn't hear a question now.
No, I agree, and I guess I wonder if within the current structure, you feel like there's a way to make it more streamlined so that it makes more sense to the person trying to navigate it. Who is saying, I don't even have kids, why is DCF reaching out to me? Who is saying, because that's what happens in economic services, so if you need fuel assistance, DCF is reaching out to you. And, or to the person who is saying, I reached out to the Department of Health and they're not helping me, and I don't know how to, there's so many people struggling to navigate the system, so how do we streamline it and make it work if it isn't making it a less enormous structure?
Totally. So let me try to remake that point. So I don't disagree with you. That is one of the things that we are constantly trying to evolve. I can't believe I'm gonna say these words, but I'm gonna say them anyway. We have been working for many, many years on something called integrated eligibility. There's a long acronym and a huge history that I'm not going to be able to share in depth, but I could bring someone back who could. That system is a system in which you could apply and be told what benefits you qualify for without having to do exactly what you're saying, Senator, which is like, know what each is and know the different offices you have to go to and do all these things. So it's integrated eligibility and enrollment. It is a project and a process that the state has been undergoing, again, for a long time. We are making progress, and it is a way in which it will make it easier for a Vermonter to access that kind of benefit services in a more streamlined fashion. That's an example of a project that's being run, throughout the agency. So it touches most departments. So I don't want to minimize at all what you're saying about needing to make the programs and the funding streams that we get from a whole huge host of different sources work together and be accessible in a way that doesn't require the client to know everything. I will be very frank with you. I have no idea how breaking the agency up would help that. I'm open to it. I'm not saying I'm opposed to it, but I don't like, then you have to have two integrated eligibility and enrollment systems because there's two agencies. Like what are we gaining for that person versus continuing to work to push the programs closer together, the offices closer together, the systems closer together. I'm not suggesting it's happening fast enough, but that is something that every department is aware of, and then the Secretary's office is definitely aware of. And for better or worse, this long-term project that has hit a lot of bumps is trying to address a chunk of that, not all of it, a chunk of that through this integrated eligibility and enrollment system. And again, I can bring somebody in if that is of interest to this committee who can talk more about that.
And I'm wondering what the timeline is for this, because that's sort of one door to all is a conversation that I've been hearing since I was in high school.
That was,
I have no good response to that, Senator.
The two things, Shayla, yes, I think having somebody to talk more about the integrated eligibility would be helpful, just to sort of get a sense of that, and then maybe a broader overview of the agency as it currently exists, and an explanation of who does what kind of thing. And then if you have suggested witnesses, maybe from the agency, but even more outside of the agency, that might be helpful for us to talk to as we're thinking about this. I would love to hear some of the suggested witnesses. Because I think we're gonna bring this conversation to a close today. I will just be frank, I'm really tired. I've had a really long week and I'm losing focus. So I need to be done for the afternoon. And the weather's not great. So if you could send along those things to Olivia and me, that would be really helpful. And we will certainly have you back in and whoever else from the agency that you suggest. And definitely want to work with you on this. This is not meant to be an adversarial thing. This is meant to be a conversation and partnership about how we can make things work better. And maybe the answer is that we don't change something with the structure, but we do something different. I don't know what that is, but I'm really happy that you're open to this conversation, and we will talk to you and others and see where we land over the next few weeks. So,
Sounds
So
good.
have a good weekend.
yeah, thank you, Shayla. Have a good weekend. Drive safely if you're driving, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Sounds good. Thanks so much.
Thanks, sir. Thanks.